as of late, there's been a lot of hate for Magic Arena. And you can't blame people, especially with the recent economy stream and the slap in the face that $50 wildcard bundle was, and how they're not approaching dusting, whatever it might be. There's a lot of reasons to come off of it. And especially in one of my more recent videos, I talked about how we should be uninstalling Arena. We should not be playing Arena. But today I wanted to provide an alternative in terms of a solution that might actually put Arena in a better place than Moto, in a way where it becomes more accessible on a streaming platform, accessible to newer players, and onboarding onto Magic the Gathering. As that's what Arena is in a lot of ways, especially because it's playable on mobile. There's a lot of casual players, a lot of newer players that don't know Magic the Gathering that come onto Arena and learn through this platform. And this method that I'm going to talk about could be a way to introduce players to new ways to play, attract players to new ways to play, get people playing other formats, and get people invested into the game, because ultimately that's what matters most, right? The money and the attraction that players have to spend more money into the game, right? Bottom at the end of the day, the dollar is what matters. So let's talk about how I think that introducing Vintage to Magic Arena is exactly what the devs need to do. So first and foremost, there are a lot of issues with some of the steps forward that the Arena team wants to take. They're focused on the economy, and they're focused on trying to get people to play formats that they don't really want to play. Historic has a metagame that doesn't really make any sense because it's based off a ladder system. It's not based off of a league or tournament structure system. The meta really only evolves and takes place in the upper echelons of the mythic rankings, so top 1,000, top 500, top 100. That's where a meta really evolves. If you think Historic has Historic or Alchemy has a metagame on the ladder system, I'm sorry, Rude Awakening here, you're just going to be playing against bruise and garbage decks most of the time. If you hop on with a quote-unquote meta deck, you're going to be facing a whole bunch of garbage because people have a varying amount of interest in the decks they want to play, a varying amount of wild cards thanks to the economy, whatever it might be. So there's no aspect of actual competitiveness. So people act like Arena forcing you to play this ladder structure doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's not really that attractive. People want to be competitive. They want to know that they're better than their opponent with their deck knowledge and their structure. So people want to be playing constructed formats with actual metagames. Now, Standard is probably the best way to get this because we do have standard metagames, active standard tournaments, especially on Moto. We do have a metagame based on the league structure and the challenge structure that then translates onto the Arena ladder. So there is a basis for it. And I think that can then be taken onto a new format. Now, there's a lot of constructed formats out there, right? We have the popular ones such as Modern, Standard, Pioneer, Pauper, whatever it might be. And honestly, if it was up to me, if there was any format they should be putting on Magic Arena, I would actually put Pauper on Magic Arena over Modern. I think Modern's got a great place on Moto and especially a great paper presence. I think Pauper being on Arena would be a great step forward. But hey, I digress. I actually want to bring Vintage on there as a true eternal format. The most powerful format in Magic the Gathering, where you can do the craziest thing. You get to play with the Power 9. You get to play with pretty much any card that actually makes sense in a constructed format. So outside of the anti cards and anything crazy out of the Battle Bond sets, they restrict things in Vintage. They don't necessarily ban things in Vintage. And specifically with Eternal formats, as I mentioned, you get to play with every card. You get everything. And Vintage, thankfully, unlike Legacy, doesn't ban things, as I've been saying. So you get the access to, even if it's just one card. For many of my viewers who don't understand what restricting is, when you ban a card, you remove all copies of it from the format. You can't play that card at all. When you restrict it, you can only play one copy of that card. So that's how Vintage gets around its legality things. You can play Mox Ruby. You can play Black Lotus. You can play Reserve List but a lot of them are just restricted. You can only play one copy of it in your deck. And that's why in vintage decks, you see this almost Commander-esque type of deck list in this format, because there's a lot of one-ofs. You want to play the Mox Jet, the Mox Emerald, the Mox Ruby, and the Black Lotus, and a lot, like, you're playing all of it, and that's where the majority of the price comes from. So it's unaffordable in paper, but on Arena, it's a whole different story, because we do have the ability to get people to pay for some of these ridiculous prices, because you don't have to pay 91,000 paper dollars to play Blue Tinker in vintage. Now, I actually wanted to go over this format. A lot of people don't know what's going on in vintage. I wanted to attract you to it. I'm a casual vintage observer. I play maybe once a month, once every 2 months, whatever it is. But I do love this format. If this format was played more and it was more accessible, it would probably be an over-modern format for me, or a second-to-modern format for me. I love this format because of how powerful it is and how actually nuanced and cool the interactions are. It's not a drag race format where people are winning on turn 1, turn 0, whatever. No, there's actually a lot of back and forth and give and take in the format. So let's go over some deck lists that could come onto Arena and that you could play in terms of variety. It's not just a bunch of decks going off with Moxes and Black Lotuses. Actually, a lot of back and forth. So first deck that I want to bring on is Vintage Doomsday. Now, Vintage Doomsday in paper, $57,000, but on Moto, if you go on a rental service, pretty affordable. If you get a mid-tier Mana Traders account, you can pretty much rent it for, 450 tickets. You lose a card or two here and there, and you get it, right? And the whole point of this deck is it's a combo strategy looking to cast Doomsday, exiling your library and only leaving 5 cards. And what that allows you to do is create these piles of 5 cards where if you take the first card, you can draw through the rest and then eventually win with the Thassa's Oracle. And now Doomsday piles are one of the biggest memes or intellectual conversations in Magic the Gathering. The more you play Magic, the more you'll come across this conversation of what is, it's a classic fun conversation or a question. What is your Doomsday pile? And actually, if you're this far in the video, I want you to comment down below right now. If you're this far in the video, comment your Doomsday pile, right? What are your 5 cards to win you the game with Doomsday? Bonus points if you don't use Thassa's Oracle. Now, of course, Thassa's Oracle makes this easier. You can put it as the second card from the top or the third card from the top, and you can just win with it. You can pull those cards away and then just win. But Doomsday is a really interesting combo deck that way, right? And funny enough, Mill has a fantastic matchup against this because you have whatever Legacy Mill is or Vintage Mill is, not really a deck, but people actually play Archive Trap in their sideboard to stop this, because when they search their library, put 5 cards there, you Archive Trap them, those 5 cards are gone. People will then actually play cards like Fractured Sanity, because Fractured Sanity doesn't actually cast itself to mill the 4. It's a ability, so they need a stifle effect to stop them from milling over the 4 and losing their library and drawing from an empty one. So again, a lot of cool mill cards that actually stop this deck. The next deck I want to talk about is Vintage Dredge. This is probably one of the most powerful graveyard decks in known Magic existence, because it uses a card called Bazaar of Baghdad. Now, off the back, it's a land that doesn't tap for any mana. You draw 2 cards and discard 3 cards, so it's straight card disadvantage. It's really weird, but you're allowed to play 4 copies of it. And as you notice in the list, it is the only land in the list. That's right. It is the only card that you need to enable this, because I want you to think about this. You draw 2 cards and then you discard 3 of them. What do you want to do with discarding? Well, if you want to draw the cards, you can then dredge instead of drawing. Okay, Vintage Dredge. Putting cards in the graveyard. If you want to discard instead, you got Basking Rootwalla for the Madness. So Madness 0, if you discard Basking Rootwalla, you're not actually discarding it, you're literally just casting it. Who doesn't want to do that? That's sick. You're casting free creatures. Why do you want to do that, though? You can't even activate the Basking Rootwalla. Well, Vengevine. Draw 2 cards, draw the Vengevine, discard the Vengevines, cast 2 Basking Rootwallas, and all of a sudden, you have these Vengevines, you have these, you have these hollow ones entering the battlefield because you're discarding 3 cards. This is a fantastic, aggressive, crazy, all-in combo deck. And it's a fantastic way to introduce yourself to the Vintage format, because it's so all-in. It's so cool, the type of hands that you want to keep and how you mulligan. It really teaches you a lot of the nuances in the early stages of the game. So this is another cool Vintage deck that I think people can check out, especially if you've got a Mana Traders account on Moto. Now, the last deck I want to talk about is Paradoxical Outcome. Now, this is the type of deck that actually uses the most expensive cards in the modern format. So, as you're going to see, it's got all those one-ofs in the list. It's got the one-of Mox. The Mox is the Pearl, Ruby, Sapphire. It's got the Black Lotus in there. It's got Mana Crypt, Dig Through Time, Time Walk, Tinker. It's got everything. The whole point of this strategy, generally speaking, is you're going to be playing a lot of cheap artifacts, 0-mana artifacts like Mox Ruby, Mox Jet, and you're going to essentially cast Paradoxical Outcome, returning all non-land cards that and permanents that you own, non-token and non-land permanents that you own to your hand, and you're going to draw a card for each one. So imagine just playing like Mox Emerald, Mox Jet, Mox Sapphire, whatever, you got a blue source, whatever, and you cast Paradoxical Outcome, you return those to your hand, you essentially draw 3 cards, play them out again, and then you can start casting the cards you've drawn again. You essentially cycle through, and then you can win with something like Monastery Swift Spear, where you play the Swift Spear and then you just play a bunch of cards, you create a large Swift Spear, you create a large amount of tokens, and then you time walk to then take another turn and swing in, right? So, and then obviously you probably want to create a bunch of them the turn after and save some, but you want to create a bunch of those tokens, save some boxes and whatnot to do that the next turn, you swing in for lethal. So it's pretty sweet. There's a lot of decks out there in Vintage, and there's one for any single person that wants to try something different, whether you want to play mid-range, control, combo, tempo, there's a little bit of everything, graveyard, anything you can think of, Vintage has, and it has it in its most powerful form, which is what's so interesting about the format. Now, in terms of the Magic Arena versus Moto discussion, there's a lot of nuance to this, right? Because obviously Vintage is the only place you can play Magic Online is the only place where you can play Vintage reliably. There's obviously Vintage leagues in paper where a lot of people are playing Vintage. Some people actually have real Vintage decks. I don't understand why. It's like literally $70,000. You could sell that and become rich, but like I ain't here to talk about personal finance. But there's also some proxy leagues out there. Some LGXs will actually do events that allows you to proxy a certain amount of cards. So that makes Vintage a little bit more accessible as well. If you have a legacy deck and you can proxy the rest of it, you can probably play a lot of Vintage decks as well. But I want to try and get this format onto Magic Arena because of the fact that Vintage right now doesn't have a lot of people queuing into it. Right? It's obviously not the most popular format because of its pricing and the lack of competitive support. There's not a lot of reason for people to play it on Moto and then maybe go play it in paper. There's not a reason to do it, especially with the lack of queues. As Justin here is talking about, I definitely recommend you check them out. Big Vintage streamer, and I love watching their stuff sometimes in the background as well. Wintrading is a big problem. So on Moto, a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll queue in with 2 Magic Online accounts, and they will wait until they queue into each other, and one account will concede to the other. This actually allows you to come towards positive EV, and it allows you to actually make up the money that you spent on both, which is kind of unfortunate. People are doing this on Standard on Moto ever since Arena came out, and although bringing Vintage onto Magic Arena isn't exactly the direct solution, I actually believe bringing it on there in the way I'm going to talk about allows people to then come back onto Magic Online and say, hey, I can actually play full Vintage here, bring more people in the queues, and actually bring down win trading. I think indirectly it might actually be a solution to one of Vintage's biggest problems, and especially the queue times as well. Now, some of the things I want to talk about in terms of playing Vintage on Magic Arena, what I want them to do, right, without thinking too hard about this, I want them to create a constructed league, an event where you can play curated Vintage lists. That's right. I want them to pick 6, 7, 8, whatever it might be, amount of decks, unique decks in the Vintage format. Get people to pay gold, gems, whatever it might be, to pick one of those decks, and you queue into this curated ladder with that deck only. And the sideboards are curated to help you against some of the other strategies. The deck list is very curated. You don't need to code in all the cards on Vintage, all the cards in Magic the Gathering. You just need to code in the interactions for those 6 to 8 decks in the format, and people get to pick and choose and learn about the format. They get to, one time they pay a couple hundred gems and they learn Dredge, and then they only go 4 and 3 in the queue, and they're like, I'm not really feeling this. Then they hop into Vintage Tinker, and they're saying, oh wow, this is a lot better. I went 6 and 1 in this queue, so I'm gonna try this again and learn. And I think curated deck lists are actually the way to introduce Vintage onto Arena. And I want to talk about some of the reasons why I think this is actually a good thing and how they would actually do this. So the first reason that I think they can do this is it actually helps the deck building part and the problem with Magic Arena thanks to the economy. In a lot of ways, if you look at Standard, there's so many different deck lists out there. It's hard for people to understand, especially on Arena, what deck list am I committing to because of the amount of rares, the amount of mythics, the cost of it. What is the type of deck that I want to play? And guess what? If you bring in curated lists, that takes the whole equation out. You don't need to actually deck build. You just need to explore, spend a couple hundred gems, and play different decks and play them through the queues. That's it. Especially if you look at something like Jeskai Control, just look at these two deck lists right here. So you have this version of Jeskai Control that went 3-2 at a MTGA Arena Zone Championship, and then you have this one that went 7-0 second place in this championship qualifier in paper as well. Look at them. How do you know what to play and what not to play? You see how the deck lists are changing? Like we have 9 MDFCs in this one, and then we have 10 MDFC 18 lands in this one, whereas we have 9 and 19 lands in this one. How do you know, okay, I should be playing 18 lands in this list, 19 lands in this list? How do I know I should be playing 11 creatures in this one and only 10 in this one? My sideboard, this sideboard right here has a lot of 1-ofs. This one has more 4-ofs and 3-ofs. How do I know this going into Standard without committing all these wildcards? I think making curated deck lists actually helps solve this problem. You don't have to make that deck building constraint, and you don't actually have to mess around with your sideboard. You have a curated sideboard that they can add or remove to if the queue is popular. They can change the sideboard to say, oh, okay, Tinker's running away with it. We're going to be adding some artifact hate. We're going to be adding some tutor hate to a lot of the deck lists that are available, and that should help bring Tinker down. And people are then having this kind of inner meta game that Wizards is helping to curate, and it's kind of interesting to play. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the economy itself. So again, one of the biggest problems is they talked about, $50, you get 12 rares, 4 mythics. People hate this, right? You then still have to pay all this money to not even build a complete Alchemy Historic Standard deck. Guess what? If we have curated lists, you can just pay a set fee, whether that be in gold and gems, to then play a curated, powerful, top of the line, tier 1, powerful, I'm saying that again, Magic the Gathering deck in the most powerful format that they have access to. Not this like powered down standard historic whatever garbage. You're playing the most powerful cards in Magic's history, and you don't even have to think about it. They literally just give you the archetype. You can explore the archetype, and it's a set fee. I don't have to pay $300 in terms of wildcard bundles and packs to make the list to then play it. Nah, it's right there. It's accessible. The cards there are set. When I play the mirror of Vintage Tinker, Vintage Dredge, Vintage Shops, when I play the mirror, I know exactly what my opponent is playing because I have the deck list with me, and that helps me to learn to understand how metagaming works, to learn to do that because I don't have this economy issue pulling me back. I can just pay a set fee and pick up a deck list. Another thing I want to talk about is how they already have this type of league curated system already set in place. They can make these events and put them into the constructed events, into the traditional constructed events where we say, here are the set amount of deck lists, play to 7 wins, and then you win some stuff. You win 1,000 gold, maybe a rare or 2 higher cards, you win some packs. What this then does is say, okay, all those people that are coming onto Arena to learn this format, they then are playing this higher power constructed format, and wow, they have all these rewards to play these other formats. Yeah, maybe I will go play Historic because I got some couple of packs, got some rares, got some mythics. I'm gonna go play this other format. I got some cards from Standard out of this pack. I'm gonna go play Standard. And then especially for those players that are already playing Standard, this is a great way for them to explore a new format if they're bored, stream a new format for those content creators out there that want to play constructed formats, don't like Magic Online, don't have a viewership that plays Magic Online. They can then play Vintage and these more powerful formats here, show people, oh yeah, look, it's just like the constructed queues you're playing with Alchemy, with Standard, but it's this different format. They can then win packs here, play this, and then, oh yeah, the rewards I'm getting still incentivize me to play the formats I'm playing, so it keeps people in the Arena client. right? And although I'm talking about, okay, you're playing Vintage on here, you want to go play it on Magic Online, another big metric that people want to talk about, especially the Arena team, is player retention, keeping people on the Arena client. This is a great way to keep people on there, because although some people are going to be playing Vintage there, they're going to come back because they're going to say, oh, Vintage, Magic Online, I got my fix there, the queue time's a little bit long, or, I'm not understanding the deck. I'm going to come back onto Arena. I'm going to play Vintage Dredge. I'm going to play Vintage Shops. I'm going to play Vintage Tinker. And then I'm going to go back on Magic Online and play that. And I'm going to come back. Oh, I'm going to play this deck now. Right? And then some of the rewards I'm getting from playing these decks. Oh, I've been opening so many packs. I've been opening so many rares. I'm not going to play some standard because I actually have this. From playing a format that I love and playing on another client, I'm going to come back and play standard here. Because this allows Wizards to monetize a format on multiple angles. It's not just, let's just play Vintage here. Let's play Vintage on Magic Online. And then, I'm getting the rewards in standard. I'm going to go play some standard. Exactly. You see how everything is coming together in terms of how they can monetize this format. And that's the big thing for them, how they monetize this format. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about. What if I told you Vintage is already on Arena? What if I told you the Power 9 is already on Arena? They don't need to code it anymore. Now, I'm being a little facetious. I'm pushing that a little far. What I want to talk about is they literally already did what I'm talking about. They literally already made an event where they made curated deck lists, coded literal Black Lotus and Power 9 reserve list cards like Soul Ring onto the Arena client. These cards literally are already on Arena. In a limited time event, it's in the code. You had the chance back in Theros Beyond Death to actually... Oh, I didn't actually include a next slide for it. My bad. We'll get to the what now. You had the chance to actually play this event right here, December 12th to December 6th. This is way back when. To play an Ashiok versus Elspeth decklist that contained Black Lotus, Soul Ring, Sword of Fire, and Ice on the Arena format. This is literally what I'm talking about. I'm saying make a curated decklist of Vintage with Power 9 cards, with these crazy interactive cards. But wait, you literally are representing the fact that you already are coding some of this onto the Arena client. You are literally coding Black Lotus onto the Arena client. It's there. You don't need to do anything else. Just need to do that for more. You're not bringing Pioneer onto the client. You're bringing this new Eternal format onto the client that's like, I don't know, Pioneer minus. Yo, bun that. You literally already started the steps of putting Vintage onto the Arena client. Curated deck list, Power 9, it's already there. They set the precedent. Come on, let's bring Vintage to Magic Arena. Let's bring the most powerful format in Magic's history onto the Arena client. Flashy, attractive. People can play Vintage on their phone on the bus. Like, this is the most accessible way to play with Power 9. And there's no reprint issues because this is online, so reserve list, nothing. Think about it, Wizards. This is the most accessible way to play the most expensive and powerful format on the Magic the Gathering card game, and you can monetize it. You can literally take the reserve list and monetize the reserve list. Wizards, I'm giving you free ideas. Get me in the boardroom. Make your money off of Black Lotus, because you ain't doing that anymore in paper on Magic Online. You ain't doing none of that. Monetize it on Arena. Get the whales on Arena. Be paying for this stuff. Get the, you're already being predatory and sucking money out of people's wallets. Why not just do it Black Lotus? Why not make the constructed players happy? Put a veil over our eyes and say, "Oh, look, we got Vintage on here." Because let me tell you, that veil's going over my eyes, and I'm shutting an eye and looking the other way if you're doing stuff like this on Magic Arena. Now, what now? Now, in a lot of ways, this video was really just a talking head video. I'm just really putting my opinions out there. I'm not saying they will be doing this. I'm saying it would be a cool idea if they could. There's obviously a lot of logistical issues in terms of getting a team to code it. They've notably, historically been understaffed, and that's what people have been talking about. They don't have enough people to code this on. They can't even code Pioneer onto the damn format, even though all they need to do is code like 3, 6, whatever amount of sets, and they could have done that over time. Like, come on. They released that Egypt set that's escaping my mind right now, and they didn't even print Fraying Sanity into the format. As a mill player, they didn't even print Fraying Sanity in the format. We just have friggin' Bruvak. Bruvak is dumb because it's literally a creature, so it's much easier to deal with. I want Fraying Sanity, folks. But regardless, I'm going down another path. There's a lot of problems with how they would do this, but as I'm saying, it's financially very profitable for them. I believe anyway, if they do it the right way. They already set the precedent for it with curated deck lists and already putting cards like Soul Ring and Black Lotus into the Arena client, so they have some inkling as to doing that. Obviously, they did that for a certain card, and I understand that, but they already did it. And as well, it attracts modal players to play an Eternal format on Magic Arena and creates cross-pollination between the two clients. It allows the standard players to play a constructed event that they're not really used to, a new aspect of Magic the Gathering, and the rewards brings them back into standard. And then you have the modal players that are playing Vintage to come onto Arena and say, oh yeah, you're now bringing people into this client, you're creating retention, I want to play some Vintage. That allows me to test to then play Vintage on Magic Online, but like, wait, I've been playing Arena over here, I've gotten all these rewards, these packs, these rares, maybe I should invest in them and play some standard. You see that? You got some retention now. There's a lot of things that you can do by introducing Vintage onto the Arena client. Now, I want you to let me know what you think down below about this. I've talked a lot. I've ranted a lot. I want to see what you think. You think this is possible? Should they not bring Vintage on? Should they bring Legacy on? Should they bring another format? Maybe they should do curated deck lists with Modern. Maybe they should be bringing Vintage Cube onto Arena. I think that's a whole other discussion in terms of viability and what they can do. But let me know in the comment section down below. I had a lot of fun like kind of thinking about this, and there's a lot of things that have been going through my mind about this, especially with the economy just kind of going down with Arena. And I think it's an interesting topic, and just want to throw it out there and get y'all thinking, plant the seed, and see what you think. But other than that, that's all I got. Remember that even the impossible is possible, and as we ponder that thought, I hope you'll join me next time as we take a glimpse into the unthinkable.